Reactor's a really amazing instrument, and the reason that it's so amazing is that it's a truly modular open system where you can build just about anything. Um, and for doing sound design and applications of making weird sounds, there's an amazing community online of Reactor folks. And once you buy in and log in, this community of people basically build synths from scratch. So if I go to the user libraries and check out the Reactor user library, you will see things that you've never seen before. Now these right now are the latest, but I'm going to go to the best rated of all time. And every one of these that you see here, all of these synths, which all look so completely different from each other, were all built in Reactor from top to bottom. Now I'm going to download a particularly crazy musical one. And then I'm going to open up a couple of weird things that, well, a fun thing and then a weird thing. Okay, so let me get into my download folder and let's see where to go. What do they call it? Serenade. Okay. There it is. So just to give you an example of how insane this is, I'm going to open this ensemble. Okay, somebody built this by hand. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this control, this little fader here. I'm going to control click on it and say MIDI and OSC learn. And I'm going to turn a knob, and that moves this back and forth. Now, what does that kind of look like it's doing? It looks like it's bowing. Now, that would have been way more impressive had I had this going out the audio output. That'd sound less like a busker. So the velocity with which I bow is being taken into account. Somebody made that for free. Anybody can download that. So you can buy Reactor and get this. It's crazy. And then if you're feeling really brave, you can look at what they did. Uh-oh. Ack. 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 How deep does this rabbit hole go? So in short, Reactor is like a million synths. You're not just getting one synth. You're getting like a million different synths. And beyond the user libraries that you can download, they also have players available. That are made by, professional sound design folks that do pretty amazing things as well. We've got additive synths. We've got Reactor Prism, which is a modal synth. We've got the Mouth, which is a really cool, sort of based on a vocoder, but not really. For doing processing, the Mouth and the Finger are really awesome sound design tools. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit, it was just, if you have Reactor, you can just get to these user libraries, and for free, you get some pretty amazing things for doing sound design. One very popular one is called Screewell. Nothing quite sounds like it. You have no idea what you're going to get when you use it. And if you just sample the hell out of this thing, you've got some of the greatest sound design for any sci-fi stuff that you happen to be working on. So you talk to any sound designer from, Sony to, to movie guys, and if they're using Reactor, they've got a whole library of patches where they just randomized the hell out of this thing and sampled it. And it makes sounds that nothing else makes. How is it doing it? Who knows? That's the thing about Reactor, is that you can download these libraries where you have no idea what's going on. But if you start messing around with it a little bit and you start just going to random knobs and, oh, I have an XY pad. If I move that around, I bet something will happen. And you just record it and pretend that you made it. For fun, there are some other things that people have built. Like, what the hell is that, right? Well, I hit play. That's fun. Well, here, check it out. So I'm going to control click, MIDI learn. I'll do that one. I'll MIDI learn this one. I'll control click, MIDI learn this one. You see where I'm going with this. Now, these are all continuous controllers. So your DAW just records them as continuous controllers. So with Reactor, the more controllers you have, the better. And then you record it, and generally what I do is I render it as audio immediately. Like, I don't want to have to worry about pulling this thing back up later and remembering what controllers I had assigned. I just recorded it as audio, and I'm done. Especially if you're doing sound design, that's definitely the way you want to play around with it. So an example of some other fun stuff. They have, some of these guys make these ones called organisms. And organisms are self-perpetuating synths. And the whole idea is that you have limited control over it. You just let it do its thing, try to capture something, and then you have something that nobody else has. Like, nobody can design that. It's completely random. So random stuff is really fun, and you know, you can even have stuff that's a bit more relaxing. It's a little scary, but... Or, you know, you can also... So this has a lot more control over it, obviously. And randomizer buttons. Usually if you're using Reactor and you're downloading these patches, it's all about the randomizer buttons. So this stuff's all fun, you know, and one of my some of them can be a little bit more painful than others, so you got to be a little careful. Like this one called Howl. You definitely got to watch out for this one because, as you can see just by... It's one of those, like, beware ye who enter here. And he doesn't start screaming until you hit this a number of times. So you know if you feel like you've wronged somebody. This one's called Gacy. So they obviously have a good sense of humor. Now these are all really fun. Like you download these things and you have fun with them and you just play around with them, immediately record them as audio and include them into your sound design. But if you start getting into Reactor, you can do some really interesting stuff, and I'm going to just give you an example of the kind of stuff that I like to play around with. So Reactor, basically, it has an architecture as well. The other architectures that we've talked about have been sample zones and groups and cells and all that kind of stuff. Reactor, I'm not even going to try to explain the whole thing to you. I'm just going to show you how I build something. So right now I have a blank instrument. It's basically just a blank slate ready to go. And I can double-click on it, and I can basically build a synthesizer from scratch. So I'll go to a macro, and I'm going to open up a pitch and gate, and then I'm going to go to my modules. I'm going to use something. We all know oscillators. You know, oscillators create waveforms. We know samplers. You know, samplers play sample loops or sample files, play them back. That's all good. But what a lot of people don't mess around with are grain clouds. Now, what's a grain cloud? Basically, you take a sound and you shatter it into a million pieces. You shatter it into all of these tiny grains. And when you run a playback head, you remember how I showed you the violin where we were running a bow across it and it was making sound? Well, think about that, but take any audio file, and as you run a playback head across that file, you're playing the file back, you know, basically playing all those different little grains back in a certain time. So I got to open this up, and I need to get to my sample view. So this is my sample editor for this module. And I'm going to load in, I should really load in something pretty because we've been listening to some pretty outrageous stuff. Let me see. Nope. Nope. Okay, I'll use that. So I can drag it in just like I did in Contact. Contact is built off of a lot of the same structure that Reactor has. The thing about Reactor that's so special is that this thing ain't going to make any noise unless I hook everything up to it properly. And if you hook it up without hooking up any controls, all it's going to do is find one little part of that sound and play it back infinitely. So before I do anything, I got to hook up all the stuff that I need to get this thing working correctly. So I'm going to hook up a pitch and gate, which is basically going to say, when I hit a key on my keyboard, it starts making sound. And then I'm going to control click, and I'm going to choose a math module called multiply. And I've got the length of whatever sample I'm using going into one side of it. And then I'm going to create a control that basically says 0 to 1. So I've got the length comes in here, and it gets multiplied between 0 and 1 however many times, however many steps I want. So if I say, let's say, yeah, I'll use tenths. Is that what I want to do? Or do Why don't I use 0.25? I'll use 0.25. So it'll give me basically that 1 has been split into quarters. And I'll attach that to, let's see, position. Actually, maybe before I get into all this, I'll choose, well, first I'll create my controls. So attack and decay of each individual grain. Here's the distance. Actually, distance, I want to do one of these as well. This one's going to be called position. So this one little control I made is what's going to allow me to push back and forth within this audio. There we go. Amp envelope. So I'll just go ahead and basically making a volume control there. There's my pan jitter. Here's my panning. Distance jitter. Now distance. Length jitter. Length. Position jitter. Select is if I want to select different waveforms, but I don't have to do that. And then we have pitch jitter. And I think that's going to be good. So it shouldn't play without a gate now. Yep, okay. So here's a panel that shows me everything I have going on. There's my sample. Here's pitch jitter, pitch slide, all these little controls that I made. Okay. I'm going to turn my volume down a little bit so I don't blow everybody out. So basically, I'm scrubbing through that piece of audio. And I want to adjust my distance and my grain length so it becomes a little bit more audible. Jitter just means randomization. All right, now we're getting somewhere. So I have a whole song there, and I found this one part with the choir. So I'm going to go to my distance, or my position, excuse me. I'm going to hit Control and do a MIDI learn. So that's starting to get fun, right? So I got a big piece of audio, and I'm taking a little window on that audio, and it's just playing that little piece of audio. And it sounds really good when I keep that position moving around. Now what I can do, I can use this knob now to do that. But what might be even cooler is if I had an LFO hooked up to it. Because then the LFO would be constantly sweeping back and forth, and I don't have to do it by hand. So I'm going to go in here. And I'm going to control click. And in Reactor, they have all of these macros, which are basically sort of pre-made things that you can hook together. And in my Reactor class, I think there are some people here from my Reactor class, and they're probably going, oh my God, is this what's coming? Yes, it is, absolutely. Except they have to build everything from scratch. But if I go to building blocks and I choose an LFO, here's this beautiful LFO that's all made for me. It has a nice little interface and everything. And I don't have to build it. It's just there. So as you can imagine, you get Reactor, you get all these macros. You want to build a 3-oscillator synth with FM and granular synthesis built into a drum machine layout? Sure. It's all just modules. You just hook them all together, and it does cool stuff. So then I go in here, and here I got my LFO. So I want my LFO to affect position, but I need to have a way to have my position work too, because I still like doing that, you know? That's fun. So if I want to have both of those things together, I need to add them together. If it doesn't receive a position, then it's going to be wherever the default position is. Now go to my LFO. So that's pretty cool, but my LFO is not really giving a big enough value. So what I'm going to do is create an amount knob. So it's basically an LFO amount. Control click, built-in module, math. I use multiply because the cool thing about multiply is you can give it between a 0 value and another value. So in this case, I need to see what my position likes to see. It says usually it's between 0, 0, and whatever the length of the sample is. Well, luckily, this thing actually spits out the length of the sample, so I can use that. So let me think about that a little bit. I've already got that going to this nice position thing. So, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and eyeball the number. I'm going to go, I'll say between 0 and 5,000. So at 0, this thing's not going to do anything. But as I turn it up, it's going to give a width to the LFO of up to 5,000. 5,000! Yeah, there we go. Now we're starting to hear more of the song, right? Anyway, so the grain cloud, basically you take a sound and you can move around anywhere in the sound that you want. And then you can like totally randomize it and create all these jittery effects. And that's the things that we were looking at in the beginning are doing similar things to this. So like I'm going to turn my position back, turn my LFO down, and then just start adding randomization all over the place. Rule number 1 when coming to one of my workshops, don't take drugs beforehand. Very, very, very bad idea. So anyway, that's a form of granular synthesis, and granular synthesis is just taking a sound and you just obliterate it into little tiny pieces and then do stuff with it. And this is just the most rudimentary of patches. When you start really understanding how this works and how to hook it up and get all these parameters working correctly, you end up with something else. You end up with something that looks something like classics, sample transformer, Travelizer. So here's the thing. You guys saw me build it from scratch. And if I open this up, this is what something like that looks like after you've built it. So we're still ending up here, right? The one module that has the sound in it that got broken up into pieces. But all of these controls are just attached in such a way that we can create all kinds of permutations. So you remember I had the LFO going? Well, that's probably something like that. Down below, we have XY commands that are allowing me to change parameters in certain ways. And if I hold it down, can you check my gain on the console? Just make sure that it's not too much gain. Is it distorting over there or is it on my end? Is the gain turned down? Okay, that shouldn't be distorting. Is that better? Yeah, turn it up now. And of course, once you get into these instruments, you can just go down here and map whatever sound you want in there. It's already built for you, you know. That's one of the cool things of, it's one of the things I love about Reactor is you just come up with an idea and you're like, okay, I want a pitch and gate. I want some oscillators. I want a 2-channel mixer. I want, oops. It's not, I want an envelope. It's what kind of envelope do I want? How about an ADBDSR? Yeah, sure, why not? I want an LFO. So I just hook it all together. And granted, you want a little bit of experience with modular synthesis because then you actually get to understand how this stuff is made. But I'm missing something. Oh, a filter. Better put a filter in there. So I control click, get a macro, building blocks, get a filter. Now I just got to make it look neat. Make sure it's all attached. I just built a synth like that. And that's like a really, 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 really simple synth. But, if I want to make things more complicated, I'm like, hey, I want more than one oscillator. Hell, I want 3. You freaking copy and paste them. I'm like, wait a minute, there's only one input to my filter. Well, normally in synthesizers, we have the ability to mix them together. So I go over here and give it 3 ports. Make some level control. Name them. Make it pretty. If I can get my trackpad to work. Thank you. Starts to get interesting. Now that's just a synth, focusing if we're really focusing on sound design, then I would be looking at samplers. And the samplers that you get within Reactor are pretty awesome. And as you see, I like to build things from scratch. Well, not quite from scratch. I'm actually cheating. My Reactor class people are probably mad at me right now because I'm like going for macros. But I'll go to my samplers here, and I'll have something like either grain resynthesis or, well, I'll start with sampler FM. Because here we have a sampler, which works just like a regular sampler, but we have the ability to give it FM. So I'm going to get myself an envelope real quick. There's my level, there's my pan and my mixer. Now, down below, here's my sample playback. So I'll find something to play back. Okay, so it's just an ah from an ensemble. Hook up my pitch. So the start point, I'm not going to really, well, actually I will do a start point thing. I'm going to do that thing again where I talked about amount. Whenever I talk, whenever I talk about amount, I'm always using that length. So here's the length of the sample coming in. And then I'm using a control between 0 and 1. So 0 is nothing, and 1 is the entire sample. So it basically allows me to travel through the entire sample. There we go. It's almost all hooked up, except for the trigger. The thing about a sampler is an oscillator is always making sound. And when we give it a gate message, we're just telling the gate to open up and let the sound out, let the sound flow. With a sampler, you have to tell a sound to play. The sound is sitting there, we tell it to play, and it plays. So that's why we have a trigger on samplers versus oscillators, which are just always making sound. So I'll just use a gate for now. The gate means I hit my keyboard, it makes a sound. Hey, it made a sound. Played a little higher. Now, the one thing that we have in the sampler that's kind of unique is we have something called a frequency input. We're able to do FM synthesis, or do FM modulation, frequency modulation, to the sound. And I'm going to start simple. So I'll use a sine wave. And the sine wave is going to tell this thing, well, first of all, I'm going to give it an amount knob, because if I float over it, it says, well, it's probably going to want an amount between like 0 and 5,000. So whenever I say amount, I always think multiply. Multiply. Zap. Pop. My right click is in the lower left corner of my trackpad. That's exciting. Okay, there we go. Trackpad's been messing with me all day. All right, 0 to, I don't know, we'll say 5,000. 6,000. Super cyan. Okay, this is going to be FM amount. So I have this little sine wave, and basically all the sine wave's going to do is modulate the signal, but it should do something kind of cool if I do things right. Now, to get it to really do interesting stuff, I need to have more than just the pitch. I need to be able to adjust the pitch because frequency modulation is dependent on how much cool pitch stuff you do. So I'm going to do some fancy stuff. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do some conversions. Actually, that's not what I want. I want some math. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, hey, turn this logarithmic pitch, which means 0 to 127, into frequency, which means hertz. It's expressed in hertz. And then I'm going to use a multiplier. I'm going to attach it. And does anybody here know how to get the harmonic series? So the harmonic series is basically you take a fundamental, let's say it's 100 hertz, and you multiply it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what I did is I basically just made it a way that I could very quickly and easily get myself the harmonic series. And then I'm going to convert it back into a pitch that I like to listen to at my sine wave. So my sine wave likes to see what's called logarithmic pitch, or 0 to 127. So it's MIDI. MIDI is 0 to 127. And in MIDI, if I say 1, I mean a semitone. That's really easy. But when I'm figuring out like harmonics and all that kind of like real audio world, linear audio stuff, I think in hertz. So that's why I had to do all this stuff in the beginning to like flip it around. And now I'm going to add the kind of stuff that's just totally normal. You're like, normal, right? Create a control, create a control. This top control is going to be called coarse. And I'm going to have it go up and down an octave. This one's only going to go up and down 1. And it's going to go in cents, so hundredths. And you know what's happening right now? A big mess. Because if I jump back here, all of the stuff that I just made is all like stacked. So this is the only thing that's kind of a pain. To like run through here and like grab all this stuff and move it around. Ooh, what says add? This should be called fine for fine tuning. Harmonic, fine, coarse. Here's my FM amount. Here's my sample start, which I can just place there. Here's my panning. Here's my level. Now, I should be able to... That's fun. It's like an example of something that you can do in Reactor that you can't do on many other synths. It's just toss in some FM, you know, toss in any other kind of synthesis that you want and make it do stuff. Here's some things that are really fun. Under Other in the Reactor library, you can get some really strange things. I love it when it says Other, because that means basically we have no idea what this thing is going to do. Check this out, guitar amp simulation. Okay, it's not receiving input, that's good. Hello. Hey. Wow, check that out. All right. Look at these beautiful tubes. See them light up? Isn't that insane? I come down and I'm like, hey, I want my tube springer. Ah, rah. Okay, it's going to feedback though, unfortunately. Oh, wait, it won't feedback if I do this.
Hi, how you doing?
I've made a couple of creature effects as well. All right, I know what I want to show you guys next. I'm going to show you guys some of the mouth. Because when you start adding this into the equation, I'm going to open up Logic, and I'm going to show you something. A lot of people don't understand this, how this works. And I'm glad that we have time to do it because it's really cool. How many of you have heard of sidechaining? Good. That'll make this a little easier.
Very much like to thank Pyramind for hosting me here once again. I think this institution is really cool, and until I came here for the first time, I had never seen anything like it in my whole life.
What I think really separates us from other people who teach is that we are outrageously passionate about what we do, and especially in electronic music.
Since coming to Pyramind, I've discovered electronic music, and San Francisco being a mecca for underground electronic music opened up so many doors for me and kind of blew my mind.
We cover everything from absinthe to contact. When people get to the mind-melting level, we get into modular synthesis.
Everything about native instruments, everything about Logic synths down to the finest detail. We learned it all.
The fundamentals of understanding how things work, that's just essential. But then beyond that, there's so much more, and that's where it gets into just a lot of the artistic side of like the creative approach of why you do something, not just how.
There's a lot of schools that just, they focus on the technicality of recording music, but I wanted something that would foster creativity and really help me develop as an artist as well.
Each of our genre-specific programs comes in 4 levels. There's a basic, an advanced, a professional, and then a master's level. And the master's level is, of course, everything we do. It's the largest and most powerful programs that we can create for you.